Traditional language learning is broken. Many of us start but eventually give up thinking we are just not good at languages. In a classroom setting, anxiety takes a hold of us and we are terrified of making a mistake. And please, don't get me started with grammar. I am tired of completing yet another fill-in-the-blanks sheet and memorizing verb conjugations only to not be able to use it when I actually get to speak with a native. It just sucks. Even modern apps haven't solved this problem. Yeah, they're more fun and especially more addictive, but how is it possible that after a 500-day streak on Duolingo, you're still not able to hold a basic conversation? Something is clearly not working. I am no exception, as I don't remember much more than bonjour fromage and... yeah, it already ends there. I don't remember my French at all, which I learned in school. Baguette, baguette. 3 years of learning French, that is a long time. I did, however, learn Spanish to a decent level within just a year, and without studying. Let me ask you a question. How did you learn your very first language? Do you remember it? What did you actually do? And why did it work so well? Because the brain is elastic enough to internalize a second or third language basically in the same manner it picks up the first.
And now I'm going to share with you the most important thing I have learned about language. Probably the best kept secret in the profession. We acquire language in one way and only one way.
YouTube Analytics tells me that most of you are not native English speakers, and neither am I. So most of us already learned a second language, English. Congrats to us. But how did you learn it? Perhaps you had it as a school subject. What I believe contributed more though is that you learned it naturally by absorbing content in the language. You watch English YouTube videos, play video games, take part of the international meme culture and social media, or prefer the original versions of series and movies instead of watching dubbed content. Case in point, you got a lot of input in the language instead of studying it meticulously. The same happened to you when you were a baby. As toddlers, we were surrounded by a world of sounds, gestures, and context. We heard our parents asking, "Are you hungry?" while offering us food. We watched cartoons where characters pointed to objects and named them. We listened to bedtime stories, gradually connecting words to the pictures we saw. So how did you learn your first language? And how should you learn your next language? Well, there's a very simple thing happening here. It's a very simple answer, and I want the creator of this method to give you a demonstration himself.
I'd like to take just a couple of minutes and give you some sample language lessons. I'll use a language that I'm sure you've heard before and maybe some of you speak, and you can tell me which of these two very brief lessons you like better. Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte im Voraus sagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. What do you think? Good lesson so far? Do you think if I kept talking to you like that, you'd pick up German? Not very likely. How about if I repeated it? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it louder? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I read it out for you and deleted every 5th word and you tried to guess what the word is? The truth is that none of these things help. None of these things mean anything, and I hope you can see that now. Here's lesson number 2. Das ist meine Hand. Verstehen Sie das? Hand? Kopf. Das ist mein Kopf. Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja? Gut. Kopf. And here I'll draw a picture now. Kopf. Ist gut, ja? Schön. Kopf. Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie Ohren? Er hat 2 Ohren. Augen. Verstehen Sie Augen? Augen. Wie viele Augen? 1, 2, 3 Augen. 3 Augen. Ist das richtig? 3 Augen? Nein. Wir haben nur 2 Augen. If you understood lesson number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach you German. We acquire language in one way and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible input.
According to Koreshn's hypothesis, we acquire languages not by memorizing grammar rules, not by drilling vocabulary, but by being exposed to language that we can understand in context. Notice how he uses the word acquire and not learn. That's because he makes a differentiation between the two. Acquisition is subconscious. It's what happens when you focus on understanding the message and not the language itself. That's how children pick up their first language. Learning, on the other hand, is conscious, meaning you focus not on the message, but on the language. You study the language. It's the traditional approach to language education that we are all familiar with. Language acquisition is a subconscious process. While it is happening, we are not aware that it is happening. According to Koresh, only acquired language leads to fluent, natural communication. Learned language can help you pass tests, but it doesn't translate well into real-world conversation. And we acquire languages through lots of comprehensible input. But what exactly does that mean? Comprehensible input is language input that you can understand, even though you don't understand every single word. There are three types of input generally: audio, text, and video, which is audio plus images. They all have their pros and cons we will get to, but first of all, what is the ideal input? The first key ingredient is that the input should be just slightly above your current level. Koresh calls this the I+1 concept, where I is your current level and +1 is the next step up. This ensures that you're always being challenged but not overwhelmed. The second and maybe even more important factor is that the input needs to be compelling. It needs to be interesting to you. Compelling input appears to eliminate the need for motivation, a conscious desire to improve. When you get compelling input, you acquire whether you are interested in improving or not. And this is extremely important in my opinion. Acquiring a language is all about not giving up. You just need to keep going. Eliminating motivation from the formula makes language acquisition way more realistic. So I learned most of my English from playing MMORPGs and watching videos on YouTube. I didn't focus on the language, I focused on the content itself. But hold up. What about speaking? Many traditional methods even want you to speak from day one.
If comprehensible input is true, what we call the input hypothesis is true, other things follow from it. And a very important corollary of the input hypothesis is this, and this may come as a bit of a surprise to some of you. Certainly came as a surprise to me. Talking is not practicing. Talking is not practicing. What does this mean? It means if you want to improve your Spanish, it will not help you to speak Spanish out loud in the car as you drive to work in the morning. It will not help you to go to the bathroom, close the door, and speak Spanish to the mirror. I used to think those things help. Now I think they don't. On the other hand, if we were a German class and we could hang together for a couple of weeks, say an hour a day of German, and I could keep the input light and lively, as in the second example, you'd start to acquire German. It would come on its own. And eventually, you'd start to talk. Your speaking ability would emerge gradually.
And I can attest to that from my experience acquiring Spanish. It doesn't mean you should never speak, but it does mean that you shouldn't force yourself to speak before you're ready. Babies know this best. They are going through a silent period where they focus entirely on input before they start producing output. And there's another reason why you shouldn't force yourself to speak: anxiety. This doesn't apply to everyone, but for many fellow introverts like me, being called up in a language class in which a teacher wants you to speak in a language you barely know in front of other people is straight nightmare fuel. Low anxiety is correlated with more success in language acquisition. When asked what aspects of foreign language classes are the most anxiety-provoking, students put talking at the top of the list. Real language acquisition develops slowly, and speaking skills emerge significantly later than listening skills, even when conditions are perfect. The best methods are therefore those that supply comprehensible input in low anxiety situations, containing messages that students really want to hear. These methods do not force early production in the second language, but allow students to produce when they are ready, recognizing that improvement comes from supplying communicative and comprehensible input, and not from forcing and correcting production. This silent period is also beneficial for better pronunciation, which is something that sounds even more counterintuitive, I guess. How can I pronounce words better without speaking those words? Well, it makes sense. When you focus on input before output, you're giving your brain time to map out the sound system of the new language accurately. You're developing an ear or a feel for how the language really sounds. When you start speaking a language immediately, you're pronouncing words based on your native language's phonetics. This can lead to developing and reinforcing incorrect pronunciation habits that are difficult to correct later. Okay, I think this was all a little too abstract and a little too theoretical, so how can you actually apply this method? Like I said initially, there are mostly 3 different ways of getting comprehensible input: watching, listening, and reading. If you're a complete beginner to the language, then watching makes the most sense. It's just easier to make input understandable if you both have an audio and visual element. On YouTube, you can find these type of videos for many languages. Other sources are series that are specifically made for kids. I watch Pokemon in Spanish, for example. Everything else will be a little too difficult to get you started. Be aware that we are talking about optimal input here. Even if it's way too difficult for you, given enough time, you would still learn the language from watching movies, given you don't translate the subtitles. Watching anime with English subtitles will not teach you Japanese. Sorry. Once you've built up some basic vocabulary and familiarity, I'm not a native speaker, as you can see. Once you've built up some basic vocabulary and familiarity with the language through watching, listening becomes an incredibly powerful tool. The beauty of listening is really that you can do it anywhere, anytime, however you want. I get most of my listening input while running, while cooking, while cleaning the house, etc. Podcasts are a great resource for listening practice. There are many language learning podcasts offering content at various levels. Start with beginner-friendly podcasts that speak slowly and clearly, then gradually move to more advanced ones as your comprehension improves. It's totally okay that you don't understand everything at first. In fact, you won't. And that's fine. The most important thing here is that it keeps you interested. If it's not interesting to you, then you should switch to another method or another podcast or whatever. If you're more advanced, radio or news broadcasts as well as audiobooks are a great source of input. One effective method that I haven't followed through with, because for me it was a little boring, is that you listen to content multiple times, to the same content. You repeat it over and over again, and the more you listen to it, the more you will understand from it. I don't really like this kind of method. I just prefer to have words in different and new context instead of trying to find like the perfect understanding of this one singular context. So yeah, for me this method was just a little boring, but maybe it's something you want to try. Another thing I haven't done but is also a useful technique is crosstalk. How does it work? You find someone who wants to learn your native language and is a native speaker of the language you want to learn. They speak in their native tongue and you speak in yours. That way both of you maximize their input. Next up, reading. The best way to improve your knowledge of a foreign language is to go and live among its speakers. The next best way is read extensively in it. Reading is a cornerstone of the comprehensible input approach, and for good reason. It allows you to absorb vocabulary, grammar structures, and idiomatic expressions in context, at your own pace. When you start out, graded readers are your best friend. These are books specifically written for language learners with controlled vocabulary and grammar. They come in different levels, so you can start with the simplest and again gradually work your way up. Here again, the key is to read extensively. You don't need to understand every word. You can use a monolingual dictionary if you feel like you really need to understand a specific word, but don't overdo this, because it interrupts your flow of reading and the goal is to read a lot. Also, try not to translate. You want to acquire your language. You want to think in your new language, not memorize translation pairs. Free voluntary reading may be the most powerful tool we have in language education. In fact, it is an effective way of increasing literacy and language development, with a strong impact on reading comprehension, vocabulary, grammar, and writing. Remember, the most important thing is that you enjoy what you're reading. If you're bored, you're less likely to continue. So choose materials that genuinely interest you. Which brings me to 2 pain points I have identified while using this method. First, finding content that is adapted to your level and at the same time is interesting to you can be hard. Secondly, how to measure your progress. When you use an app to learn a language, you have different levels that you can reach, which is certainly a motivating mechanic. If, on the other hand, you get some of your input from YouTube, some from a book you read, and then also listen to a couple of podcasts, there is no central place that tracks your progress. Well, let me tell you, I've created a solution that hopefully fixes both of these problems. Let me introduce you to Langia, a new language learning app that focuses on comprehensible input. I made a short video that explains how it works.
Langia is the best choice for easy, natural, motivating, and fun language acquisition using comprehensible input. Starting with stories. You get daily stories that are made just for you, matching your interests and language level. These stories are smart. They use a spaced repetition system to bring back words you need to repeat, but in fresh context. Read the stories, hear them out loud, and test yourself with quizzes. Want more? Just type in any topic you're curious about, and boom, a new story appears. We keep track of your progress with every word you come across. It measures your learning by counting the words you've encountered and the ones you've really nailed down. The more you bump into a word, the better you'll know it. It's that simple.
Wow!
If you want to focus on a word, you can easily add it as a flashcard that you can review later. Pictures, sample phrases, and audio clips make new words stick in your mind even faster. Our goal is to let you learn languages with content you truly enjoy. Articles are a great example here. You can take any web article you would like to read and translate and simplify it for your level. Now you get to read or listen to the content you love while learning the language. And if you have any doubts, you have a 24/7 language support at your fingertips. Our AI chatbot can create tests for you and help you with any language queries you might have. So this is Langia. Start your journey today and discover how fun and effective language learning can be.
So yeah, this is it. This is the result of countless hours of research, experimentation, programming obviously, and a genuine interest and passion for learning new languages. I just believe language acquisition can be more natural, more effective, and more fun. The feeling you get when a new language clicks, when you suddenly understand material you didn't before, or when you get a compliment by a native speaker, it's just an amazing feeling. And so I know that Spanish won't be the last language I acquire. My plan is to focus one more year completely on Spanish and then go into another language, either something more adjacent like Portuguese or Italian, or if I'm brave enough, I would like to try Japanese or Korean. Langia is in the very early stages here. It's far from perfect, but already very helpful to me and hopefully to you too. I've got a whole roadmap of features and improvements planned that will make Langia the go-to platform for comprehensible input. I truly believe that. My girlfriend and I put significant time into this project. That's also why you haven't seen me at all on this channel for the past 4 months. I hope to get more active from here on again and make content about language learning and learning in general. After all, my now currently best performing video of all time is my video about generalism, which is in its essence a video about learning and making things. I don't really have any catchy outro for you. I'm just happy I found something I really like to work on and where I feel like I can make an impact. More people should learn more languages, and the easiest way to get there is by making it effortless and enjoyable. Hope you check out langia.com, and if not, I hope some of the other resources and methods I presented in this video were helpful to you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.